Thank you all for being here and good morning. I do want to first acknowledge that this month we are celebrating the history of Black people in America. This is a time for our city to reflect on our history, recognize the progress that we have made, and to renew our commitment to the progress that we are still working towards. Black history is Chicago's history. From the establishing of our city, Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, to the revolutionary activist and organizer and leadership of Chicagoans like Ida B. Wells, Mayor Harold Washington, and Reverend Jesse Jackson. This month, we remember all of these heroes, the heroes of our past who have paved the way for someone like me to be standing here today. But more importantly, we honor this month not just with words, but with continued actions to invest in people, ultimately to work towards healing our communities. My administration is committed to creating pathways to prosperity and equity for Black and brown communities by strengthening our neighborhoods, expanding our economy, and making sure that Chicago remains a haven where Black families can thrive. The $1.25 billion Housing Economic Development Investment Bond. We are developing affordable housing, neighborhood amenities in our most disinvested communities. Our mental health system expansion initiative is delivering long sought after resources, clinic spaces, mental health services to the communities that have been denied and disinvested in of these resources. Our policy changes and legislation that is uplifting workers, including the One Fair Wage Ordinance and the expansive paid leave policy, are ensuring that Black workers are paid fairly for their contributions to our city and are empowered to balance their work and personal lives. Our investments in youth employment are creating tens of thousands of job opportunities for young people between the ages of 14 and 24, particularly from the south and west sides of Chicago. This is certainly helping to make our city become better, stronger, and safer, and more equitable. This Black History Month let us remember the vital importance of diversity. Diversity is the acknowledgement that our nation is an incredible space for the globe to have varying life experiences and perspectives that carry a richer, more vibrant society. In Chicago, we honor our city's diversity, and we will always remain an inclusive city. And with that, we'll take questions.
Mayor, good morning.
Good morning. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. I'm wondering on two fronts if you can give us an update. I know your corporation counsel is here. The latest on your thinking of traveling to Washington, D.C., and any new ICE numbers you can provide for us on detainment and arrests since we spoke last.
There are no updated numbers around detainees or arrests. The conversation is still ongoing as far as what has been requested of me and 3 other cities. Mary?
Good morning, Mary Richardson, Laurie, Court Counsel of the City of Chicago. With respect to the Oversight Committee's invitation, we are in active discussions with them relative to the content of that invitation. And I don't want to divulge those conversations, but rest assured, we are discussing their request.
And do you have a timetable on when you might know?
I don't, but we will be reporting that out once we do.
Great. And Mayor, if I may, on one other topic, it's kind of gone off the radar for a little bit, but can you offer us an update on the discussions with the Bears and the stadium? Where do things stand at this moment in time?
Well, we're still committed to making sure that the Bears stay in the city of Chicago. That's my goal. I trust that's the goal of many others. The Bears and that organization has expressed a commitment to remain in the city of Chicago. Those conversations are still ongoing. Look, there's a real opportunity for us to develop the lakefront. The infrastructure needs that we have there were pre-existing to the proposal that the Bears have put forward. The infrastructure investment is really about not just making the ingress, egress more palatable for the top tourist location in the state of Illinois, but it also allows us to develop that area and to build real economic advantages for West Side, South Side communities. The type of infrastructure investment that would create the jobs that would be not just to develop and transform the lakefront, but long-standing jobs. We're talking conservatively $8.1 billion of income, 43,000 jobs for the entire region, 24,000 jobs just for the people of Chicago. And that is just merely centered around the infrastructure that's separate and apart from the Bears paying for their own stadium. Those infrastructure needs are there regardless, right? And so I think it's important to note that the stadium would be paid for by the ownership along with visitors through the hotel tax, which is structured through ISFA, which are dollars that are solely there to build stadiums. Dealing with the debt on the asset right now that is depreciating is something that we have to deal with as well. All that is a part of the proposal. Again, there are conversations that are ongoing around, again, the stadium in and of itself, which is solely paid for by the McCaskey family, Bears ownership, and then the infrastructure needs that have been there long before even this proposal has been put forward. So the hope is that we get, true commitment from everyone to create jobs, to develop the lakefront, and continue to attract tourists to the entire museum campus.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
A conversation we've been having in our newsroom, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it, is, from the top down over what's been happening over the past couple of weeks, does it change the meaning of what it means to be a sanctuary city? Does it mean less with all that's been going on?
I've said this before. The goal of the Trump administration is to get us to surrender our humanity. And that we won't do in Chicago. Chicago is tough. We're a city that is made up of strong working class people. Immigrants from around the globe have found sanctuary in Chicago. Whether you are a Jewish immigrant, a Polish immigrant, an Irish immigrant. Remember, at one point, Italian immigrants were not welcomed. My family, as descendants of slaves, we were part of the second migration, and there were individuals that had issues with black folks migrating from the south to the north. So these are challenges that have existed for a very long time. But what is impressive about Chicago is that we always stand the test of time. And so for me, it doesn't change the meaning. In fact, it places us front and center to have a real substantive dialogue of what it means to be a global city. Now, look, there are laws. There are laws. I would ask respectfully the President of the United States of America to work with Congress to pass substantive, comprehensive immigration policy. We do that. We can set stronger parameters around how we create pathways to citizenship, how we have more support at the border. We actually fund judges so that asylum cases can be moved through faster. These are the intelligent, responsible decisions that need to be made so that we're not simply having a conversation around how a city situates its status in terms of its relationship to the globe. Thank you for that question. Next time, invite me into the newsroom conversation. I want to talk more about some other things, but that one I think is pretty impressive. Thank you for that question.
Good morning, Mayor. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing terrific. Thank you. That's
Good.
a beautiful blazer.
I appreciate the compliment. What's your reaction to the lawsuit regarding Bally's Chicago in response to the ownership stake for women and people of color?
John, can you talk about that?
Good morning. John Robertson, Chief Operating Officer for the City of Chicago. And so we all know that the agreement that was put together between Bally's and the City of Chicago was very specific in terms of what the requirements are. Part of that agreement included this investment component. It is to ensure that the economic benefit of this project is enjoyed by a broad array of citizens and for our city. And so we fully intend for Bally's to meet its full commitment as it relates to that. And we are going to continue working towards the construction of the permanent casino so that we are able to realize the revenue as well as the economic benefits that that project brings.
What's the reaction to the lawsuit specifically, though? Thank you, Mary.
Mary Richardson, Laurie Corp Counsel. The City of Chicago, along with the Gaming Board, both individually and as a board, were named with Bally's in the suit. So we will defend our position. We have begun the formative stages of analysis. There's a court case that is happening today that is the beginning of that process. It is likely that that will unfold over the course of many months, and we are happy to provide periodic updates, but we are in court as we speak on the very subject that you've asked about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, the other question I have regards hemp. You're on record for wanting to tax it. The city's been on record with other unregulated things like vapes and getting rid of those. Why is hemp different in your eyes?
We're on record of regulating hemp and making sure that it doesn't harm and destroy people. That's what we're on record. In fact, the regulatory proposals that we put forward were stronger than what was being proposed in Springfield. Now, in terms of how it is, taxed, that is a question that the legislative body will continue to undertake.
Good morning, Mayor. My colleagues at WBEZ reported that your administration is pushing a new draft of the Anjanette Young ordinance that does not codify a ban on no-knock warrants. How is this not a reversal of your campaign promise?
So what we have done is we've worked with Anjanette Young herself, along with alders, as well as our police department, to come up with a comprehensive ordinance that will get at the challenge as well as the problem that we saw manifested unfold. We'll continue to have those conversations with all the respective people to ensure that a circumstance like that doesn't happen again.
But can you talk about the practice of no-knock warrants itself? Has your position changed on whether they're sometimes necessary, or do you think it's no longer viable to ban them?
We're working with the person who was front and center in this moment, working with the person who experienced the pain, along with alders, along with the police department, to come up with a comprehensive response so that circumstances like that don't happen again.
Hi, Mayor. I'm Carolina Garibay. I don't know if you probably saw this, an executive order from Secretary of Transportation that would basically prioritize supporting projects. It says communities with marriage and birth rates higher than the national average, that if that happened, that would mean Illinois would likely lose funding. I'm wondering if this is something you're worried about given various Chicago transportation projects, the Red Line extension, construction at O'Hare, et cetera.
Well, we're grateful, first of all, that we were finally able to secure the $1.97 billion investment from the federal government to expand the Red Line to go all the way out to 130th. Look, this administration has demonstrated over and over again that it is committed to working outside of the parameters of the Constitution. Our corporate counsel is going to continue to review all of the executive orders and the potential implications or ramifications that it will have on city and state government. We're not going to be intimidated or afraid because you have someone who is committed to working outside the bounds of the Constitution.
And we've seen kind of a slew of executive orders the past couple of weeks. How do you kind of decide what you should actually be concerned about and what maybe is just talk?
Everything that this president has put forth, we take absolutely seriously. Now, look, I know you all are aware of this because you've had multiple conversations with me. I've said multiple times that the extreme right in this country has taken issue with the results of the Civil War. And the proof is now positive. All that which we fought for during Reconstruction, particularly at a time as we celebrate the history of Black people in America, whether it's birthright citizenship, whether it's them going after our ability to express our power through voting, its attack against women. I mean, these are all of the Reconstruction era victories. We know that this president is committed to dismantling the Department of Education. There were 5 demands of descendants of slaves: education, housing, transportation, health care, good paying jobs. Now, I've added a friendly amendment to those demands, environmental justice. So we take all of those threats seriously, because if this president is willing to literally release every single criminal who partook in a coup, quite frankly, to work to overthrow or to undermine our democracy, his threats are real. And I'm going to continue to stand up for working people in this country. We're going to lead the way in the city of Chicago. So every single executive order, we see it as a threat, and we will do everything in our power to ensure that working people are defended in this city.
Hi, Mayor. Anjanette Young told us that the no-knock ban was taken out of the working draft because in working with your team, your police superintendent, and COPA, she concluded it wouldn't be politically viable. Is that your opinion as well? And can you explain more around your thinking and your team's thinking around taking that out?
Look, as I said before, our comprehensive response to this tragedy in the city encompasses the voice of the individual who experienced this tragedy, along with our police superintendent and alders. All of us have to come together to recognize that we have to respond to something that was harmful. And there's a draft and there are ongoing conversations to figure out how we can have an ordinance that works for everyone and that we can put residents at ease that they won't be subject to those type of interactions with law enforcement.
And if it's not included in the ultimate draft or ordinance that gets passed, do you still think a no-knock ban warrant is a no-knock warrant ban is necessary in the city, or is that just not something that will be needed after the reforms in the current ordinance?
Well, we're going to continue to work through the draft. What I will say is we want to make sure that the interactions that the residents of the city of Chicago have with law enforcement are interactions that build trust and exemplify constitutional policing. That's the ultimate goal here. We're going to continue to work with the police department, alders, Miss Anjanette Young, and she's been very courageous throughout this entire process. I'm very much committed to ensuring that these interactions between residents and law enforcement are constitutional interactions and that we don't exacerbate distrust and harm.
Hi, Mayor. Taxpayers are being asked to pay $1.25 million to compensate the family of Dexter Reed. The settlement also includes unspecified reforms on pretextual traffic stops. Do you think the use of pretextual traffic stops needs to be curbed, and what types of reforms are needed?
Well, there's not a question of whether or not if we need reform. I believe everybody's committed to that. That's why we've been working collaboratively around establishing constitutional policing through the consent decree, from trainings to making sure that there's better supervision, closing cases. But as far as the particular ask, Mary?
Mary Richardson, Laurie Corp Counsel. We are under judicial seal relative to any terms associated with that particular matter before the court. It is inappropriate. Indeed, it is not allowed for us to speak about any terms under discussion and before the judge. We are prohibited. So there's nothing that we can say here in terms of the terms of that, any potential settlement. And anyone who does say it, who is in my position, would be violating a court order. I will not do that.
Mayor, you also said at a WTTW town hall event last night that...
You were there?
I was not there, but tuning in, that brings...
You did tune in. Check it out, Heather. Your ratings just went up.
You said there that Bring Chicago Home must be passed. You know, how will you take that issue to voters again? How will you tweak that message to maybe gain more support? And what's your timeline for maybe trying again?
Well, look, that's not my decision alone. I'm just simply saying it's good public policy. That's all. You know, when you have 97% of residents of the people of Chicago will receive a tax break, and that there would be incremental increase on transfer of property to individuals who have property worth $1 million or more, we're talking a very small portion of the people of Chicago. Look, I've spoken to residents across the city about the need to invest in more affordable housing, to respond to the unhoused crisis that we have in America. In order for us to do that, we need revenue. It's just that simple. And what we have demonstrated since I've been in office is that we have a one system initiative. where we're putting dollars towards responding to the unhoused crises. We're building more affordable homes, creating opportunities for developers to actually invest in large swaths of land, particularly in places like Inglewood and North Lawndale, where we can build up the community, hire folks who reflect the community, and then provide a basic human right. No one disagrees with that, but it does require investments. Look, I put forth the best effort, the largest investment in the history of Chicago for housing and economic development. We're simply saying that we need more. And there is an unfair tax structure in this country where those who have keep more and those who have less have to give more. That system in and of itself is inequitable. And we're going to do everything in our power in the city and work with community organizations, work with businesses and corporations to ensure that we have an equitable tax structure that allows us to meet the needs of everyday people.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi, I know you were there. Nice job.
I was, thank you. I wanted to follow up on your remarks about Bring Chicago Home. You said that it was the corporations and the ultra-rich that leveraged the city's migrant crisis to essentially defeat Bring Chicago Home. Are you concerned that that kind of rhetoric will make it harder for you and your administration to work with Chicago's business community? I spoke to some people who took exceptions to those remarks last night.
Well, we have to tell the truth. What I take exception to is that we've allowed people to go on and on in this city without access to a basic human right. The fact that people are more offended by us challenging them to do more than the issue in and of itself is problematic. Now, look, it's no secret of what my values are. Now, if people want to see us respond to this housing crisis, we know the amount of money that was spent to conflate the issue. We know it. We know it. There's evidence in that. Now, I've said that I will speak and work with anyone. What we're not going to do is we're not going to be dishonest about the challenge here. We know why in the first place that the referendum is even called for. When Cook County Board President John Strozier said that we should do this in 1996, it was the same interest that forced this type of process in Springfield under a Republican control body. Now, we have to tell the truth to people. Now, it's hard for people to accept that, but you know what's harder? It's harder for people to afford homes in the city. You know what's harder? It's harder to pass budgets when you don't have more financial options to respond to the demands that people have. So, look, if people take exception to the things that I say, this is not personal towards these individuals. I have a moral responsibility to tell people the truth about what's available and what's keeping us from having access to what's available. I'm going to stand up for working people in this city once and for all, and if individuals wish to join me in that effort, they can reach me. They know my number. So the next time they say something to you that they take exception to, just say, call the brother. He'll answer.
Shifting topics, Governor Pritzker issued an order through the state's Department of Human Resources that those who had participated in the January 6th insurrection should not be offered state employment. Should you issue an executive order preventing anyone who participated in the January 6th insurrection from being employed with the city, or most specifically, the police department?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I commend the governor for his actions. It's the right action to do. I said earlier in this conversation, January 6th is something that I do believe that our country, we skate over too much. I just know that if that crowd looked differently, I believe there would have been a different response. I do believe that. And the fact that we have a president that essentially exonerated and made it okay for that type of threat against our democracy, that is disconcerting to say the least. As far as what we will do in the future, we're going to continue to have conversations about how we make sure that the best and the brightest individuals show up and work for our government. But we have not made any decisions around any particular group that we would consider restricting. But what I will say that our standard for public service has to remain high, because the people of Chicago have to be able to trust that the people who show up every day on their behalf have their best interests at heart.
Hi, Mayor. On Bring Chicago Home, like for the remainder of your first
But
term.
apparently, this really provoked folks. Go ahead. That's all right.
Well, I mean, because you're describing why it's important, right? But
Yeah.
you haven't, I don't think you're committing to, will you seek to a resolution at City Council like you did last time to put it on the ballot so that it actually is before voters?
But again, that's not a measure that I will go into in isolation. That's a conversation that we have to have with advocates and other city council leaders. What I'm simply saying is that was an opportunity for us to generate revenue to respond to the ongoing housing crisis. And I think if anybody knows anything about me, I certainly didn't get here by taking a shot and perhaps getting even a setback and then giving up. I mean, you all were there from the very beginning as a community organizer, as a union organizer, as a public school teacher. Administration after administration pushed back against the measures that I thought were important. You know, I took arrest in this building, blocking elevators, because I wanted to make sure that the voiceless had their voices heard. Right? There are individuals that I'm working with, and I took arrests at their particular corporations. You know, so all I'm simply saying is that because we take a hit, we don't crumble. We don't respond obsequiously. You know, we respond with a level of boldness that gives people confidence that we're not going to end our effort to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago simply because we took a hit.
The Bears deal that you were describing before, you know, it requires on $2.4 billion in public subsidies. Since it was announced, it's been
What do you mean by public subsidies? Be very specific.
$900 million from ISFA, $1.5 billion.
Okay, so the $900 million from ISFA is a fund that is only utilized for building stadiums. I just want to make sure that we're clear about that, right?
Yeah.
So the $900 million, which it all doesn't necessarily have to go to the Bears, right? There are other sports entities that could take advantage of it. It only has one purpose. So I don't want people to misunderstand. I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure that I'm perfectly clear that we're not talking about public subsidies in the sense of public dollars that could be used towards something else being diverted towards building a stadium. These are dollars that are designed within ISFA that have one purpose, which is to build stadiums.
ISFA's authority ends in 2032, and that tax would be used to pay down McPier bonds. So it is a choice to extend that authority past then and give a team like the Bears who are calling for $900 million. But my question is...
Or any other team that is asking for it.
But the Bears plan specifically calls for $900 million to the Bears. So
Well,
other
of course
teams
they're
have
going
asked
to.
for
Of course they're going to ask for all of it, but no one else has asked for anything there yet.
I guess that's where we're getting on my
Okay.
question.
All
You know,
right.
the state, specifically Pritzker, has called this dead on arrival. Since then, the team has discussed or explored looking at the Michael Reese site. Since last, whenever that was, May, right, when they unveiled it, have you spoken with the Bears and told them, hey, this current structure isn't going to work, you have to put in more private funding? Have you, do you like the idea of going to Michael Reese? Like, what more would you like to see out of the Bears, either on location or funding, to re-pitch the state on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, there's no plan that has been presented at the Michael Reese site. No one has presented me a plan. We don't even know what those costs of that site would be. So if people are interested in that site, they should actually show up with a plan. Because the assumption is that somehow this site will make it more palatable or easier. We don't know that. In terms of the ongoing conversations, as I said earlier, the goal is to keep the Bears in Chicago. But here's the bigger goal. The goal is to create economic opportunities so that we can continue to grow our economy. And I just want to make something perfectly clear. And I thought I was clear earlier. The infrastructure needs along the lakefront exist, separate and apart from the the proposed new stadium. Now, I don't know when the last time you all had a chance to go or attend a concert at Soldier Field, but getting in and out, it's horrific. It's bad infrastructure. It's the top tourist location in the state. This museum campus and green space that we have to open up along the lakefront is paramount. We need that anyways. In fact, there have already been proposals around the infrastructure needs on the lakefront that predate this proposal. The reason why I'm laying that out is because whether it's the current proposal or another proposal, that site has infrastructure needs. It's an opportunity to create jobs. That's quite frankly, look, I like when the Bears are winning. I do. I think all of us like when the Bears are winning. And I think having a dome stadium and all of the different revenue that could come from a stadium, by the way, that the city would own. So the billionaires would pay for a stadium that the city owns. And I'll pass it to Mary just in a second. But the ability to create long-lasting jobs and economic opportunities for the working people in the city, that is my primary goal. To have a public space that has a public benefit that creates jobs. We're talking about 43,000 jobs. 23,000 jobs just for Chicagoans. $8.1 billion of income into our region. That's exactly what we need right now. But Mayor, do you want to add anything else around the conversation?
Mary Richardson, Laurie Corp Counsel. Amongst my duties include ongoing negotiations with the team. Those discussions continue. We are finalizing varied aspects of that transaction, and they will begin to have additional conversations they need to have with the state. But we continue to have an active dialogue with members of the Bears team.
I'm sorry, if I could just follow up. On that, do you mean, because the funding, the funding obviously comes from the state. You're talking about locking up a deal or close to a deal on share of Park District revenue? Is that what you're...
No, we're in the normal course when one is building a stadium, particularly one of that size in this city, you have a host of what we call deliberative or definitive documents that go through in order to deliver on that promise. So we're still in discussions with the Bears, and we are hopeful that we are going to be able to deliver on a stadium within the city of Chicago.
Thank you for that question.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
You mentioned the Department of Education earlier. There's new reporting out from NBC News that the White House is preparing an executive order to dismantle it. I want to ask you, if Congress would approve such a thing, what specific impact do you think that would have on the city of Chicago? Would there be, funding concerns, other things that we haven't even thought of?
Yeah, it's dangerous, irresponsible, reckless, all of the above. And it would have a profound impact, not just the city of Chicago, but the state of Illinois and the entire country. I just saw recently some schools being closed down in Dallas, Texas. The undermining of public education is a real threat to how we sustain our democracy. It's through the public space in which debate takes place. It's through the public space, particularly our public education system, where we explore history and have debates around the causes of the American Revolution, discovering the Civil War, the Trail of Tears, the Louisiana Purchase. You can tell I'm nerding out now. These threats are real, and so it would cause impact with our special education, bilingual education, transportation within our school districts across America. And this is why I've said from the very beginning, as a public school teacher and as a parent, and I know people have tried to make my status as a public school teacher and as a parent as a liability, which I find to be, quite frankly, ironic. We're a system that is built to support families, where individuals who do the work, who support their families and support these children, that somehow that would be a liability. And so that's why we're working hard to push back against this administration, whether it's a president or a CEO. we cannot accept threats that would ultimately provide not provide, but be detrimental to the sanctity of public education. And so those threats are real. Again, special education, transportation, bilingual education, defunding the Department of Education would be a slap in the face to black folks in particular, but working people. I've quoted W.E.B. Du Bois before. Public education at the expense of the state, particularly in the South, after all, is a Negro idea. It was one of the major demands of descendants of slaves. And so this is what I'm saying. This president, this administration is dead set on relitigating the Civil War. There's a clear distinction here. Either you support the Constitution or you do not. And it is very clear right now that President Trump, as well as any of the individuals that support his existence, are obviously working on the side, on the outskirts or out of bounds of the Constitution.
And switching gears just a little bit, this afternoon, President Trump is set to hold a press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Given that's happened today, I want to ask you about the artwork that was at the Chicago Cultural Center that aldermen have asked, to have it removed, saying it's anti-Semitic. Can you give us an update on where that stands? And we're also...
Yeah, that hearing is happening right now. So, I mean, if Commissioner Hespeth were here, she could give you more details around that. Like, look, tomorrow I'm going to be visiting an art exhibit in celebration of Black history. I've seen very provocative artwork that depicts slavery. I've seen artwork where a noose with the colors of the American flag were gripped around a Black man. Very provocative. And I think it's important, particularly at a time when history and culture is being threatened and undermined, that we don't find ourselves exacerbating the attempt to silence the voices of individuals that speak their truth through their lived experiences. So there's a conversation that's happening right now where individuals, even within the Jewish community that were a part of this art structure, are laying out the perspective that art brings to this political season. And to have any discourse shut down is something that we should be very wary of.
Mayor Johnson, the last time I was here, I asked you about keeping Chicagoans safe from violent migrant crime. You said, quote, "Not my job." Since then, 63-year-old George Levin was brutally beaten to death. 2 illegal aliens have been arrested, charged in this crime. They were driving a luxury Lexus. If you don't mind, I would like to ask my question, just like everybody else gets a chance to do that. They were driving a Lexus, living in a $2,000 a month apartment. One of them had just been literally taken in for questioning and suspected of trying to lure a 13-year-old girl into his Lexus. The question is, these are obviously crimes that have occurred as a result of Chicago's sanctuary city policies. Is this why you're afraid to testify before Congress on this issue?
Well, first of all, let me just start off by saying I did not say it was not my job. The question was asked around the federal agents, particularly ICE, and their responsibility to deport individuals that have been detained by ICE who have been not just charged but convicted of a crime. That is deportation policy that is set by the federal government, and we will not interfere with that. So in that aspect, that is the job of the federal government to deport. Now, in terms of criminal activity and crime, period, that is the work that our police department will continue to lead on, regardless of anyone's immigration status. If you commit a crime in the city of Chicago, we will hold you accountable. And in this instance, these individuals have been charged, and I fully expect that they will go through the legal process in this country, and by their peers or by a bench trial, these individuals will be held accountable. Look, As violent crime continues to go down, not just in Chicago, but around the country, it doesn't mean that we should pat ourselves on the back. There's a lot more work that we have to do. I have not met anyone who does not want to have safer communities. No one. No matter if you live on the north side of Chicago or the southeast side of Chicago, we want safer communities. And that's why my administration is fully investing in our communities, because we know that safe communities around America, around this country, the one thing they have in common is they invest in people: education, housing, jobs, healthcare, transportation, environmental justice, creating opportunities for our young people. We've hired, almost 28,000 young people. We'll hire up to 29,000 young people. In the neighborhood that I live in, as crime has gone down in Austin and job opportunities have gone up, there's a direct correlation. The more opportunities we create for people, the safer we'll be. And individuals, whether you are born in Chicago or not, if you commit a violent crime and we find you, you will be held to the highest standard of accountability.
Yet you've clearly told the Chicago police that they should not cooperate with ICE, that they should not do anything to prevent these violent, repeat illegal alien offenders from rape, rob,
No,
murder.
that's not the case. What we've said based upon the ordinance is that we do not interfere, we do not obstruct, but we do not, local law enforcement will not dub as federal agents, that there's a clear separation there. That's the only thing that this ordinance essentially lays out. And so it's not a matter of the police department not going after violent criminals. In fact, we just had a graduation yesterday where we promoted more detectives. Our clearance rate continues to get stronger because we know as one act of deterrence is to actually solve crime. But that's not the only way in which we build safe communities. Look, you have to be holistic. I understand this very petite, narrow approach towards governance. Government is bigger than that. It has a full responsibility to ensure that people are healthy and strong and taken care of and educated. When we do those things, we have less violence. Here's what we should be more concerned about. While we're talking about undocumented individuals, do you know how many illegal guns come through Chicago? That's what the President of the United States of America can help me with. Let's stop the illegal flow of guns that are on the streets in America. Some of the most violent cities in America are in red states. We're not even in the top 80, city of Chicago. Now, look, I'm not saying that there isn't more work to be done, but this characterization that somehow the city of Chicago and places like Chicago are the most violent cities in America, I would implore you as a public school teacher, go check out the top 25 most violent cities in America, and then come back to me and we can talk about it. Thank you. Craig? You've already had your two questions.
That wasn't my question. My question
Thank you.
is you don't want the police to work with ICE, yet you allow the Chicago Police Department to prevent the city inspector from looking at this gift closet that you have right behind that door that contains unregistered Gucci bags, Hugo Boss, cufflinks, Mont Blanc pens, top shelf decor.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I'm trying to ask my question.
No, you're not.
The people of Chicago see this as corruption. Would you today agree to letting the reporters in this room go through that door and show them what is in your gift, Gucci gift closet?
All right. First of all, so it's not my closet. It's a locker inventory room where gifts are received but not accepted. I don't accept these gifts. They're received, right? And this has been a practice for multiple administrations. I think it's important to note that no one has ever asked to see that log. Ever in the history of this locker inventory. No one has ever asked. But the log is accessible and available. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to use this one? Sure. Hey, let's switch gears, Mayor. Thanks. The Trump administration is revoking the protective status of the Venezuelans who came here and were given asylum to be here legally. Given the fact that the city has spent, $150 million plus on helping them, clearly they seem to be wanting to target these people for deportation. Do you feel this is also kind of a shot at sanctuary cities like Chicago who would help them?
Well, it certainly is another attempt to create fear and division But I'll turn it over to Beatrice. You talk about the TPS. Can you speak to that?
Good morning, Beatriz Ponceleon, Deputy Mayor for Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights. We just learned that there's this possibility, has not yet been published in the Federal Register, that TPS will be revoked and no extensions allowed. What that would mean is that there's a group of Venezuelans in April that would lose their status, and then another in September. I know that nationally groups are looking at ways to support this, to support the Venezuelan community. But we also have to note that there's been a pause on the refugee program as a whole. So beyond the Venezuelan community, this is going to potentially impact other refugee communities as well. In Chicago, what we recommend, and really across the country, is for people to get legal counsel now so that they understand their status, how this could impact them, and be prepared when the change happens. The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights has a central hotline that really has become the main resource for folks. And if anyone, whether it's for themselves or a loved one, can call that. The number is 855-435-7693. So if they are concerned about their status and their work permits, this is the time to get that legal counsel.
If I can follow up with you, though, Beatrice, did you feel like this is a slap in the face to all the people who worked so hard to help these people get assimilated here in Chicago and move on?
I wouldn't call it a slap in the face. We did what Chicago does, which was to provide supports for immigrant and refugee communities coming here. They have already begun to become part of Chicago. They are Chicagoans, and just like immigrant groups and other refugee groups in the past, will find their way. Certainly, it is a challenge to these communities, and it is something that many of us who are supporting immigrant and refugee communities will continue to look at and monitor. Thank you.
And Mayor, if I can go back to just the whole committee in Washington. Obviously, you have expressed a strong support for and no intention of wavering from your support for sanctuary cities. It appears that you're going to force them to subpoena you to go as opposed to voluntarily going. I mean, why not just voluntarily go and make your case to the American people before the Congress?
Well, as I've said, and as our corporate counsel has indicated, there are ongoing conversations. This is not just simply about testimony. There are, if you look at the entire scope, Mary, I believe I'll get this correct, the entire scope, there are documents that they're asking for. There are other mayors that they are asking to have these conversations with. I have a pretty strong relationship with Mayor Wu in Boston. She just gave birth, right? I mean, there are other circumstances that exist here that we're coordinating with 3 other cities, because again, they didn't just ask for the city of Chicago. They didn't just ask for me to show up to testify. There are a series of documents that they are requesting, some of which our corporate counsel can speak to. But this is really not about, I don't believe this is just simply about sanctuary cities. This is really about our democracy. It is. You all, look, there are 2 positions. Do you support the constitutional rights and equal protection under the law, or you do not? And, I know what the presentation looks like, but I think we're all smart enough in this room and in this country to draw deeper conclusions. Because again, as I said, that there are concerns that I hear all over the city of Chicago when I talk to mayors. They do talk about the role that the Department of Justice plays in protecting people, equal protection under the law. We do have conversations about the fact that we have to build more affordable housing units. The town hall last night at WTTW, shameless plug here, go check it out. Go look at the questions that everyday residents of the city of Chicago ask. And I'm not saying that immigration didn't come up. I'm not saying it didn't, because it did. But I can tell you there were multiple questions on housing. And this is why I think it's indicative that 3 or 4 of reporters in this room asked about bringing Chicago home, because that's what people were asking about. They were asking about our education system. There was a teacher there last night, I believe that she was a social worker, just saying that what commitment do I have to ensure that teachers are not bogged down with every single societal challenge. And so, I don't know, Mayor, if there's anything else you want to add.
Mary Richardson, Corporation Counsel. I tried to articulate earlier that we're in ongoing dialogue with members of that, representatives from the committee. We don't believe there is going to be a need to issue any demand that way. It is an invitation. When one gets an invitation, you begin to discuss how that would unfold. They have requested a host of documents. We'll be discussing with them specifically issues around what it is that they've requested of us, and we don't anticipate being obstructionists in any way.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Your administration told the Inspector General that it wasn't practicable to allow them to view that inventory room as you just described it. And she had told me that it was practicable to just allow them immediate access. Can you talk about why it was not practicable to allow the inspector to view that room?
All right, I'm going to do my best to try to break this down as simplistically as I possibly can. You just can't come to the 5th floor demanding to roam the 5th floor. The FBI can't do that. Just can't do that. And there are people in this department, I want to make this point absolutely clear. And the history of the city of Chicago, whether it's the OIG or any other individual, has ever asked to see the book log. Just by show of hands, how many of you in this room knew that such a room existed prior to this? Just by show of hands, just look around. No one in this room ever heard of such a room. Now, the log was designed by Mayor Sawyer because there were gifts that were received and not accepted by other administrations. It was Mayor Sawyer to put together a practice to log the gifts that are received and not accepted. The fact that you actually know what's in the room gives you some indication that I'm clearly not accepting them. That's why they're in this room. Now, I'm going to turn it over to our corporate counsel. There is a process. All of you understand process in this room by way in which you can access the 5th floor or anything that is designed for the public. Now, why did these particular individuals show up on this particular day for the first time in the history of Chicago to seek out this room that I had not even seen? I don't know their motivations. I'm simply saying is that there is a process. Mary?
And if I may add while Mary's walking over there, the Inspector General argues that the law is on her side in allowing her to show up unannounced and force you to cooperate with an investigation if it is practical, as she had told me. If you guys could just open the door, that would be like the practicability standard that you should follow.
Mary Richardson, Laurie, Corporation Counsel. I won't lean into the characterizations that you've proffered in terms of whether or not she said it was normal or proper, etc. Let's talk about, because having 2 people show up is not within my experience, and many of you may know, I've been around for a bit. That's never happened. It would not be normal. Indeed, it's inconsistent with how one would conduct such an act. But let me focus us on what we will be doing going forward, because that is going to be the normal. When gifts are provided, every mayor, and I've been affiliated with many, but every mayor receives gifts from people who visit, dignitaries who visit from other countries, people who are in communities who believe they ought to acknowledge the mayor and his good work, by giving them gifts. Typically, the way that works is that is then brought back to the hall and it is placed in a log. Sometimes you don't know who that person is, and it will list, say, unknown. Sometimes you do. We're going to make sure that we have a process that acknowledges the date that it came in on, to the extent that we know it, who gave it, and their affiliation. For this room, you should be aware that those logs are going to be posted publicly. It's not going to be a question of individually departments or those who feign a version of investigation having access to it. All the public should know. And so those things are going to be posted publicly so the public knows there's on this list of gifts what came in. Sometimes the items are perishable, so there will be language that will include those will be redistributed. Sometimes when you receive certain categories of gifts, it's more appropriate to then, for the then sitting mayor to consider nonprofits to re-gift those to. That will also be part of the what will be published going forward. What will also be published going forward is a video of what the space where these items are kept. Some of you may discern, particularly those of you who've been around for a while, sometimes a mayor will receive a very large picture or a very large piece of art. Those would be on display. That will be captured as well. That will be part of what is provided to the general public. I'd like to take a little bit of this bluster out of the air and refocus us on what will be the procedure that we're using going forward. The law procedure, as the mayor properly articulated, dates back to Mayor Sawyer. Mayor Daley had a version of that, and certainly Mayor Rahm, Mayor Lightfoot, Mayor Johnson will continue with that concept, but we're going to best it and move it further to make it available for the public to see with a video of the space so that everyone has access to see the kind of things that are received by every mayor, any mayor, when they're in the role.
Understood, and I'll pass it in a second, but I just, to clarify, when you said about the identities of gift givers, I know that the IG had raised issue with a large number of those gifts not having a giver. Are you saying that those are situations where you don't know who they are?
Typically, may I give an example of what happens? You have the mayor's out at a site, and he has staff with them. A person walks up and say, I really love your mayor. I'd like for him to have the following. They don't often identify themselves, so one of the things that we're going to be doing is making sure that the staff just ask the question, may I have your name, and get their affiliation. Sometimes that can happen. Sometimes it's a rush of people, and they receive the gift on the mayor's behalf, and the person doesn't identify themselves and walk right away. You will see, dating back to logs from time immemorial, there's a category, usually they'll just say unknown or not knowable or some variation of that because they don't know who's providing it. If conversely, there's a dignitary visiting from another city, in that instance, you often, or another country, you often know who it is, and you can identify the name of the person, their affiliation, the date on which it was given, et cetera, et cetera. You're welcome.
Councilor Richardson-Lowry, can you tell me when that...
Before she comes back to, I just want to state the most important part about that story is that people come up to me and tell me how much they love me. Just want that to be on the record. Please come on back, Mary.
Sorry, just the question was when will those videos and those logs be posted publicly?
We plan to start doing that next week. I'd like to say we'll be able to get to it this week, but there is a process. I recognize the bureaucracy doesn't move at the pace that each of you would like always, but that will begin next week. And if you'd like a notice of the effective date of that, I'm sure we can make sure that you get that notice.
Thanks so much.
I can't wait to see this room myself because I've never seen it either. So I'll be online clicking on the video as well.
Okay, so I asked this question last time I was at a press conference, and then I've asked it to BACP and the Corporation Council. Corporation Council said it's the mayor's office you need to ask. As we go forward with hemp legislation, I still am not clear on how the 2012 law that prohibits the non-pharmaceutical sale of any substance with substantially similar effects to cannabis-derived THC is allowed. It's not allowed. Anything with substantially similar effects to cannabis-derived THC is not allowed for sale in the city. So how does that make hemp-derived THC with, I can personally attest, very similar effects to cannabis-derived THC? How is that allowed for sale?
Well, look, first of all, the most important thing here is that we are committed to stronger regulation around the sale of hemp products, right? We are committed to that. As far as the specifics to the correlation or the connection between hemp and THC, that's why there are ongoing conversations with our law department, with the legislative body, along with individuals in the General Assembly that also believe in stronger regulations.
Okay, my question is, and I'm told it's only the mayor's office that can answer this, why is THC derived from hemp not substantially similar in its effects to THC derived from cannabis?
Well, again,
because it would make it completely illegal to sell, not in hundreds of places, every corner store in Chicago. It would be illegal to sell anywhere in Chicago if someone was following the law.
Again, I believe all of those efforts are being worked through, and there are ongoing conversations around stricter regulations and what a taxing structure could look like.
So just to be clear, nobody in the city has been able to explain this, including law, BACP, or the mayor's office.
Again, there are ongoing conversations around all aspects, and look, keeping people safe is most important. And I said this before too. This is not, a judgment against anyone. These are not necessarily items that I partake in. Same thing with the consumption of alcohol. Like I can tell you as a public school teacher, I've seen the harm, and there's stronger documentation on the harm of alcohol on young people than any of the things that we are discussing right now. I'm not minimizing this one, certainly not. I've told you all before I became a teacher, I was a part of the ounce prevention, that work that was supported by Diana Rauner. It's the one thing that me and the Rauners had in common, was educating young people around the peril and the harm of controlled substances. Look, our ultimate desire and goal here is to make sure that there are strict regulations around any substance that could cause harm. And as far as the conversation around this particular component that you're talking about, perhaps we can have a conversation with our comms director to see how we can provide more of an understanding around the specific element that you're raising. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Put on a different hat now. What would you do if you were running strategy in D.C. for the Democrats to start changing the narrative, given that Trump acts so quickly on everything and the Democratic Party machine has a hard time, it seems, responding? What would your recommendation be?
Well, I think part of what, what's laid out in your question is really the strategy that we have to be far more proactive of articulating our vision. What the Trump administration has done, as I've said last night on WTTW, the town hall there, I would encourage all of you all to go check that out, is that the President of the United States, I liken it to someone on the mound, and they constantly balk. This illegal, deceptive move to throw off runners in the batter. And you've seen repeatedly that regardless of his presentation, whether he is wrong or even more wrong, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. Like he's had to not only retool, but rescind many of the things that he has been promulgating. So we have to be very clear, and this is what we're doing in Chicago. We have to be very clear about our values. And look, I know that there's been an attempt by the extreme right in this country to sow seeds of fear and doubt and division. I believe that as the city of Chicago, we can fight for reparations and comprehensive immigration reform policy. We can do both and. I believe that we can fight for a public safety through the lens of full investment while also holding people accountable who cause harm to our communities. The things that we get right and the things that we do well, we have to continue to tell that story. I will say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. This is where I need you all's help. This question was asked last night, WTTW, this town hall. I said, what keeps you up at night?
They pay you for all of this promo.
This is what keeps me up at night. It's the fact that people in the city do not fully know what's fully available to them. I need you all's help as we have these town halls, and they don't all have to be sponsored by, a particular public news outlet. But when we have these conversations around what's available like we had a meeting just the other day ago in Austin about how we are going to work to spend the $432 million for the families who need support for the recovery of their homes, that the damage was caused by the torrential rainfall. Community participating. Now, by community participating, they now know there's $432 million available. And then we're bringing in developers, particularly black developers, who can actually help get the contracts through an open process to be able to repair these homes. And so, for me, it's why I've been so adamant about standing up for working people. The people that I talk to, and I talk to people all over the city of Chicago, I'm asking you all to trust me on this. Some of the things that are raised in these spaces, no one asks me about. It doesn't mean that it's not important. That's not what I'm saying. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm saying that when I talk to everyday Chicagoans, they're either nervous or afraid around immigration or their child's education or being able to afford to live in the city. Democrats are right. But now it's time for us to demonstrate how what we do substantially improves the quality of life for people. And as we have these town hall meetings and these gatherings, I implore you all to show up to these meetings and hear what people are asking. There were 3 questions that were asked by the audience, maybe even 5, that were all related to young people. So I was able to talk about youth employment, of which some people didn't know that those opportunities were there. We talked about the missing middle, where developers are working collaboratively with my chief operations officer to purchase land in the collective to build more affordable housing units. We have real substantial crises in this country at this time. We have to have very potent and very clear, concise, deliberative measures that we can articulate so that the people of this city and this country know exactly who and what we are fighting for. The last thing that I'll say, I know that there were some people who took exception to me challenging corporations and the ultra rich in this country. President Biden did the same thing. He did. He wasn't wrong. And so what we have to do is be far more proactive and dare to be bold and audacious, and not this obsequious type of response where we are responding as if we are in servitude to this administration. Proactive, organize, tell the story of the people. And I would implore and I would invite you all to participate or hold your own town halls. You don't have to invite me to talk to residents of this city about what they want. And then we can say either we're going to deliver that, we're going to organize to get it, or that we are already doing it. And the more we get that message out, the more we tell that story, I believe it's going to strengthen our ability to actually make sure that this country gets back on track.
Governor Pritzker has been one of the more outspoken folks on this. Have you and he talked about that? Are you finding common ground in opposing the White House?
Thank you for that question. Lots of common ground with the governor. Lots of common ground with the governor.
Does that mean you're talking more?
Well, I think more is a relative term, quite frankly. And honestly, I'm not going to get in a back and forth. That's not how I operate publicly. I will say this, that I speak to the governor. I also speak to state reps, state senators. There is a real opportunity for Democrats to lead in this moment. That's why I don't find it to be very productive to point fingers. That's why you don't see me do that. Not at each other. Now, I will challenge people when we have to do better, just as folks get to challenge me. But to describe relationships or to get into any type of back and forth about how many calls are made and how much more, I'm not going to do that. I'm saying that I'm committed to ensuring that working people and our values are front and center. And to your question, you're absolutely right. There is a real need. It's not just an opportunity. It's a need for us to offer up more clarity in this moment. And that more clarity is centered around building a better, stronger, safer Chicago, a more inclusive economy where everyday working people can live freely, can live in vibrant, safe communities. That's what I want for Chicago. That's what we are moving in this city. And I believe that's an opportunity for Democrats across the country to see not only what I'm doing, Brandon Scott, Youth employment, violence is down in Baltimore. Andre Dickens, building more affordable homes in Atlanta. Paul Young in Memphis, building more affordable homes. Tashara Jones, looking to expand economic opportunities to grow St. Louis, where you all know that's where my wife is originally from. So I don't mean to be long-winded. I think that there is a really unique moment in our country's history where clarity of consciousness has to be the prevailing form of governance and not this sort of tit for tat around some of these more, again, isolated discrepancies or issues that people might have. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you.